Service Top Guns. How are we doing today? That was weak and unacceptable. Now, I was out there signing some books last night, and I saw some of you sneaking back a little late to your rooms. And how many people are still dead from hypoxia? You guys alive? Everybody good? Well, I'm going to need more energy to get through my program. So, W Service Top Guns, how are we doing today? Acceptable. Well, as Matt said, my name is Matthew Buckley, and my call sign is Whiz, and I'm going to clear one thing up before we go any further. Let's just say not all fighter pilots are running around out there with Gucci call signs like Maverick or Fun Boy. Let's just say that some of us go out and earn our call sign, and it's usually by doing something stupid. So I'm Whiz, and I'll take no questions about how I earned my call sign. But as you heard Matt say, I flew 44 combat sorties over southern Iraq, graduated from the Navy Fighter Weapons School, which many of you know as Top Gun, but also have a lot of experience in your business boots as well. In the Navy, I was fortunate enough to fly with the Blue Angels when my buddy was the lead solo on the team. Got to fly in a MiG in Pakistan, one of the scariest flights of my life. And there's Iraq. In case you didn't know, this is the Persian Gulf. It literally is a lake. So we're heading south right here. This is Iraq. There's Iran. This is Kuwait. And that's the Gulf. It's literally like a lake, and the aircraft carrier is somewhere right out there. And graduated from the Navy Fighter Weapons School. That's me on the right with the cool-looking haircut, high speed. I was also an LSO, a landing signal officer. So when I wasn't flying, I'd be on the back of the boat, day, night, bad weather, in the wind, trying to help my fellow aviators land aboard the ship. As I said, I have a lot of experience in your boots as well. Taught myself how to trade options when I was on active duty. You don't join the Navy to get rich, duh, clearly. So I taught myself how to trade options and had a very brief airline career. Morning of September 11th, I was getting ready for my first flight as a pilot for American Airlines. When I saw the aircraft hit the tower, I raced out to Naval Air Station Fort Worth, where I was flying for the reserves, and went from flying an airliner that day to potentially shooting one down. So I lost my airline career, got furloughed in the blink of an eye, and was tossed out on my rear end by American Airlines. So I had to scramble. So eventually popped up on the radar of a multi-billion-dollar trading firm in Chicago by applying everything that I learned as a fighter pilot to the business world and trading that we're going to talk about today that you can do at Whirlpool. One of the things I'm proud of the most is I started a charity, a foundation, a nonprofit called No Fallen Heroes. And I'm really excited to share with you about what this does. So No Fallen Heroes takes Navy SEALs, fighter pilots, veterans who are suffering from PTSD, traumatic brain injury, trauma, depression, and we take them using entheogenic therapy. Anybody know what entheogen stands for, or is a code word for? Psychedelic assisted therapy. And we take these folks down to Mexico, which is just an absolute tragedy that we have to take veterans to a foreign country to get treated. So I want to share with you, this is actually the world premiere, actually. So we're going live on social media this week, but I'm going to show you, you guys get the first look. And that's who I was on the phone with, my producer. We're going to show you the first look. This is just a quick snippet of our No Fallen Heroes documentary where we follow 5 fighter pilots who've gone down to Mexico and their lives have completely changed for the better. So let's sit back. Let's go supersonic with psychedelics.
When they
So that's our mission, no fallen heroes, trying to take some alternative therapy to break free of big pharma and their stranglehold on the VA and veterans. So look forward to seeing that after Maverick launch, literally a month from today or last night, Top Gun Maverick launches. So we're going to fly formation on that Paramount $150 million ad spend, and we're going to show what really happens to aviators once we get out of the cockpit. But I'm not here to talk about that. I'm here to talk about how you can apply what I learned flying a fighter aircraft to what you do every day here at Whirlpool Top Guns. Now, how many of you, speaking of Top Gun, how many of you have seen the movie Top Gun and you're still willing to admit it? All right, good. Anybody remember who the two characters being the key word in the movie were? Right? Goose and Mav. Anybody remember those scenes in the movie where Goose and Mav are zorching along at about a couple hundred feet with their oxygen mask hanging down, and they're wondering what bar they're going to go to that night, and oh, by the way, watch the mountain in front of you? Well, when you're flying a $65 million fighter aircraft, that ain't exactly the attitude in the front office. Flying an F-18 Hornet is extremely physically demanding. Now, this morning, I think I weigh about 200 pounds. So at about 9 Gs, this body feels like 9 times 2, 1,800 pounds on me in the cockpit. It's hard to stay conscious. The blood that's in my head is being pulled into my lower extremities, making me nearly pass out. Anybody passed out recently? Matt's looking up here. You can raise your hand. I mean, last night. Well, if you've ever passed out, what goes first? Your vision, right? Anybody ever stand up real quick and you kind of gray out? I would fight the jet on the edge of consciousness. Why? Because I want to win. When I merge with my competition, my enemy, and I want to pull 9 Gs and get that advantage, I would fight on the edge of consciousness. I'd start to lose my vision. I'd still hear the radio and move my hands, ease off on the G, get the blood back, oh, there he is, and put the G back on. Because we have a saying flying fighter jets, you lose sight, you lose the fight. You lose sight of your threats to success, you're always going to lose the fight. Well, today I'm going to teach you a couple tools and techniques to help you keep track of the competition, your threats to success, and you're going to win. What I want to share with you right now is a training video of me and a buddy fighting over the Republic of Texas, right? They left once, they can leave again. And this is a training environment, but I want you to watch the intensity with which we train. We have a saying at Top Gun, you fight like you train, and you train like you fight. So this is a 1 versus 1 dogfight where there's only one winner and there's one loser. In my world, the loser doesn't get to go home at night. So sit back, relax, let's go dogfight in an F-18. Now, we can make fun of the heavy breathing during the break, but what did you find unusual in that video? Where did I spend the vast majority of my time focused? Was it inside the office? No, where was it? Exactly, it was focused outside at my threat, my competition, those threats to my mission. As I said, you lose sight, you lose the fight. Very appropriate in air-to-air combat and very appropriate for our Whirlpool service provider Top Guns as well. So I'm going to teach you the tools and methodologies that you're going to be able to succeed, and I call it superior execution. Now, some of you might have heard the term, well, we want to strive for flawless execution. Is it possible to have a flawlessly executed mission? No, right? Anybody ever see the JV team, the Air Force Thunderbirds? Or the varsity team, the Navy Blue Angels? They look pretty damn good, don't they? I've flown with the Blue Angels. Their debrief was insanely long and insanely critical. Why? Because there's never been the perfect flight demonstration. There's never been the perfect mission. So, but don't you want to be part of an organization, a team, that is constantly in pursuit of that flawlessly executed mission? That's why I call it superior execution. And I use what we call a corporate battle rhythm. I've used this at multi-billion-dollar trading firms. I've used this at startups. I've used this across industries. This is copy and paste, and you all can use this as well. A corporate battle rhythm, and this is the acronym I want you to remember. It's called PASTE. As aviators, sometimes we work on STEM-only power, right? When I'm dogfighting, breathe in, breathe out, STEM only. So we use a lot of acronyms to remind us of stuff. So PASTE, P-A-C-E-D. This is a continuous improvement model. This is literally taken from the Navy Fighter Weapons School at Top Gun. PACE stands for plan. In a couple minutes, I'm going to give you my 6 steps to how I plan a mission, whether it's on Wall Street or a fighter aircraft. After we plan, we're going to adjust the plan with something that I call a red team. And I guarantee you, you're going to walk out of here with your business improved. After we adjust the plan, we have to communicate, or what we call brief, the plan to our team. With a solid plan that's been red teamed and briefed, execution is pretty damn easy. Today I'm going to share with you an example of what can happen in the business world or in the cockpit when we become what's called task saturated. Just too much stuff going on, spinning 12 plates, and then they start falling. After we execute, 90% of the businesses in this world do what? Nothing. They plan. Hell, they have a plan to plan. Whiz, we have death by planning. Great. We don't red team. We kind of talk about the plan. We went out. It was an absolute failure. Then what do? On to the next one. Wrong. In my world, 45 minutes to the second after my wheels touch the runway, we get in behind closed doors, we take the name tag off the chest, we take the rank off the shoulder, and we hold what's called a nameless and rankless debrief. If I flew with the Admiral ain't an Admiral in the debrief. We are all the same, and we are focused on what is going to improve our execution. Debrief. Get the lessons learned from that debrief and transfer them throughout the squadron to your sister squadrons to improve everybody's execution. If you plan, adjust, communicate, execute, debrief, I guarantee you, you're going to win. So let's get airborne. Let's talk about the planning process. I have 6 steps that I knock out to a freaking superior executed mission. I guarantee you, if you take these, they're going to work. Step 1 is to determine your mission objective. In my world, a mission objective has a couple characteristics. It has to be clear. I mean, laser-like. That everybody in the room goes, I understand that. No, what's that mission objective mean? It has to be measurable. If it's not measured, it didn't happen. It has to be achievable. Now, I'm a businessman. I get stretch goals, but if you throw something out there that's so far in the future, everybody in the planning process just mentally checks out and go, that ain't happening, but let's just sit here anyway and waste our time. Clear, measurable, achievable, and it supports a strategic objective. You shouldn't be getting a tactical mission objective that you go, how does this support what we're trying to do all the way up here? Shut up, just do it. Clear, measurable, achievable, and it supports our strategic objective. So step 1, determine the mission objective. Let's go high level for central command, so to speak. Reduce, disable, and destroy ISIS terrorist enclaves in Iraq. Got it. 50,000-foot strategic objective. How do we eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? So we're going to take a tactical mission objective from this strategic objective. What about for the Top Guns in this room? W service owners and operators provide a world-class service network which delivers exceptionally friendly, knowledgeable, and convenient service recovery solutions. 50,000-foot, awesome strategic objective. That's also an elephant. How do we eat that elephant? One bite at a time. So, tactical mission objective for me as a fighter pilot that supports the strategic. Escort search and rescue helicopters and maintain air superiority above the downed aviator from 50,000 feet within 50 nautical miles from 1704 Zulu to 1815 Zulu. Clear? Laser-like. Measurable, you're not going to see an insect fly in that airspace, I guarantee you. Achievable, well within the capabilities of my aircraft and my training, and it supports that strategic objective. So it's a good tactical mission objective. What about for you all in this room? A good tactical mission objective. Any of this look familiar? Is that clear? Is it measurable? Is it achievable? There you go. So that is a good tactical mission objective. Folks, when you're making a mission objective for yourself, for your team, no pie in the sky like be number one in super. What the hell does that mean? Make them clear, make them measurable, so 6 days, 6 weeks, 6 months down the road, we can look back and say, did we hit that? If so, why? If not, why not? And improve our execution. Okay? Step 1, clear, achievable, measurable mission objective. Step 2 in our planning process, once you have that mission objective, is what are the threats? What is going to knock us out of the sky today? Anybody know what that is? Yeah, exactly. It's a SAM. It's a surface-to-air missile. You see one of these things coming up at you, you're having a bad day, right? This thing can fly 5 times faster than I can pull up to about 32 Gs. How many can I pull? On a good day, about 9. And that's when I was younger. And it's got a warhead on the end of it whose clear, measurable, hopefully unachievable mission objective is to blow my pink body out of the sky, right? So it's a very formidable threat. What about in your battle space? We got Samsung, LG, Frigidaire. Look at all these folks. Very significant threats, right? So we have to identify these threats. Additional to these external threats, the competition's doing what? They got new tools for diagnostics. They're approaching your foot soldiers in the field, aren't they? Creating value props to erode your exclusive strategy. That's a threat. Samsung, GE, their own service network, starting to fish in our pond, aren't they? Lack of understanding the rest of the network. A lot of threats. So once we establish our mission objective, we get on the whiteboard and say, what are our threats? Map them out, get them out there. Ongoing turnover across the National Field Service Management team. Map all your threats out after you have your mission objective, okay? And then I put a little C or U after each one of these. Why? Is that threat controllable? If it's controllable, it's not that much of a threat anymore. What if it's uncontrollable? These are the threats you need to worry about the most. The threats that you lie in bed at night and go, man, I hope that doesn't happen, are the ones you better plan on happening. That's what I do. For example, the weather. Now, my wife would like to say, as a naval aviator, my husband thinks he can control the weather. He can't. So in a brief, in our planning session, do you go, man, I hope the weather's good over the target area? Or do you say, what if the weather is bad? What are we going to do? Flex to the secondary target, change weapons. We come up with a plan. So when you brainstorm your threats and you find some that are uncontrollable, don't crumple them up and go, man, that's going to suck if that happens. Plan on it. Okay? Step 3, after we do our mission objective, threat, we're going to identify our available resources. 3 words on that line right there. What's the most important? Available. This isn't when we get in a room and say, well, if Matt only gave us this, we could do this. In the military, that's called tasking up. You don't task up. What do we currently have in our toolkit that's available to negate some of these threats and hit our mission objective, right? So what are some of our available resources? Great brand recognition. Whirlpool, I grew up with that name. Great brand recognition, overture promotions, competency development training. The field service managers, their support, tireless support. A lot of folks in this room doing that. Map out your available resources that can negate the threats that you just listed, okay? Step 4 is probably one of the most important steps. Evaluate lessons learned. Where do lessons learned come from? Experience. Where do they come from that you're going to start using the word today? The debrief. After action report, I think PJ uses, right? Get into a room and figure out what worked and what didn't. Take those lessons learned, put them in a database, put them in your folder. I don't care where it is. So the next time you do this mission, you do what? Let me look. Oh, we were going to do that again. Forgot that just failed and that was miserable, right? We actually have a lessons learned database that I'm going to talk about. But evaluate lessons learned. The last time we flew this mission, what was a train wreck and what worked? Let me give you an example in my world. On my first cruise on board Abraham Lincoln, we pulled off of the coast of Pakistan to do Inspired Alert, an exercise against the Pakistani Air Force. Looked on the flight schedule. Kid from South Jersey, where's Danny V? What exit? Kid from South Jersey, 27 years old, on the flight schedule. Lieutenant Buckley is going to fight 2 MiG-21s over the skies of Pakistan. What do you think I did the rest of the day? Work out, got some good chow, right? Went to bed early? Well, I did all those things, but the most important thing, I went down the hallway on the aircraft carrier, past a couple big Marines with automatic weapons, through a couple ciphered lock, get Maxwell Smart doors, right? And I sat down in front of a top secret computer and I entered the words MiG-21, Pakistan, hit enter, and up popped every lesson learned from every Air Force, Navy, Marine, and NATO ally who had fought these guys in an exercise. I sat in the air conditioning, sipping on my venti upside down caramel macchiato, accelerating my experience. I didn't even need to get airborne. I knew what these guys were going to do before they did. That's why this is so important. Do you think in combat we just go, wake up and go, I wonder how this mission's going to go today? Or do you think we look at all the lessons learned of the missions that have flown before us? Evaluating lessons learned is critical to your success. I remember, so I do debrief. Every one of these steps, I do a workshop with businesses. I take a deep dive. I remember doing a debriefing workshop. I forget the client, but old Red's sitting in the back. And we're debriefing this mission that they did, and old Red's sitting back there. He's like, oh, hell, Whiz, I knew this was going to fail. Why, old Red? Well, it failed the last 7 times we did it. And I'm like, hey, Einstein, get in your time machine and fly back to the planning session where we did step forward that evaluated the lessons learned and speak up, right? Don't have those folks sitting in the back with their arms crossed, like, have them speak, capture their knowledge so we don't reinvent the wheel. Now we make a decision. As the person leading this planning, you can make a decision. Is this mission a go or no go? Right? Do not go to the next step without making a decision, because sometimes the threats are too big, or you don't have the resources, or you might get to a point in your planning process where you go, this one is going to fail. Then what happens? Whoever's leading the planning session goes, let's knock it off, you guys go get some lunch or whatever, I got to go to the skipper or the admiral. Ma'am, sir, believe we can't do this mission for these reasons. If you do that, you've done your job as a leader. If you get to this point and go, we're all going to die, and you keep going, it's your fault. In the military, I've gotten to a couple of these points where I go to the admiral or the skipper, and she or he went, Whiz, I appreciate it. You are right about all of this. I'm like, sweet. Still go on the mission. But now, who is responsible? The heavy. I did my job. I said, these are the potential pitfalls. This mission's going to fail. Got it, Whiz. Go. Awesome. Determine a go, no-go point in your planning process. Don't do a suicide mission. All right, let's assume today we're a go, right? So after we do steps 1 through 4, we knock out step 5. This is the meat of our planning. Who's going to do what by when? Courses of action, these are our tactics. This is who is going to do what by when, and how do we know the what got done? The most important 3-letter acronym I'm going to give you is this, SPA. Not the $300 back rub across the lake, a single point of accountability. One of the hardest things that hit me transitioning from the military to the business world was they had MPAs, not the Motion Picture Association of America, multiple points of accountability. Folks, I don't care if there's 11 people on a team doing something, somebody is in charge and they have 51% of the vote. somebody's back who's going to get patted or throat's going to get choked to success or failure. Single point of accountability. The three most powerful words I want you to leave here with are these. I got it. In the squadron, if I said, hey, Matt, I need X, Y, and Z done by next Thursday, and he said, Whiz, I got it. What happened mentally in my mind? It's done. It's done. And if it isn't going to be done, he's going to come to me and say, Whiz, couldn't get it done, here's why, and here's what I recommend you do. When I got in the business world, when I told somebody to do something, they're like, yeah, sure, I'll do that. I found out there was no way in hell they were going to end up doing it, and I ended up doing it and found out about it on my own. Be the type of culture, the type of organization that says, I got it, and I mean it. Three very powerful words, because if you say those words and you don't, you just completely diminished yourself in my mind. We're going to talk about the Blue Angels in a little bit, man. When they say, I got it, that's a life sentence right there. I got it and mean it. All right, so after we figure out who's going to do what by when, everybody's pretty, what do you guys think about this planning process? Pretty tight? How many of you are ready to go risk your life on it? Dang it. You've been paying attention. Of course we don't do anything right now. Why? Because we have to contingency plan. We have to ask, what if? Right? Another area that businesses just completely fail miserably at is planning for contingencies. Ladies and gentlemen, the time for me to figure out what I'm going to do when I get shot at by a missile over Afghanistan is not when I get shot at by a missile over Afghanistan. I already made that decision sipping on my Diet Coke in the air conditioning. I see the smoke, I'm going to do this, flares, chaff, pull G. I already know what I'm going to do. We sit in the planning process and figure out what reasonably could go wrong in the future that we can address right now instead of freaking the hell out when it happens. Ask, what if? What if we are in a more unfavorable position in part availability by convention? Servicers plan for mass exclusivity, exit forming, a unionized decision, another pandemic, significant supply chain interruption. Sit there and ask, what if, transport yourself into the future, plan for these things to happen, and when they don't, be pleasantly surprised. Ask, what if? So, after we plan, it is time to adjust that plan. That planning process, folks, is pretty tight. I've done that in a cockpit, I've done it on an aircraft carrier, I've done it in a Wall Street boardroom. It is scalable to whatever you are doing. Now it is time to adjust it. Why? Because when you do planning, if 10 of us are in a room doing planning, when we get to the end, step 6, contingencies, what do we all do? We all look at each other and go, man, we're pretty brilliant. This plan is awesome. Most likely it isn't. So what do? Red team. We get to that point in that planning process where it was a pretty good workout, and I say, no, we ain't done yet. You don't move. I go out in the hallway, and I grab 3 to 4 squadron mates who weren't involved in the planning, but they kind of know, they have situational awareness to what I'm doing. I bring them in, I sit them down, and I say, red team, here's what I'm doing. And they sit there in silence, and they take notes. I brief them completely on my plan, and when I get done, I go, red team, what do you got? And you could just hear the shotguns go, shh, and they fire. They rip my plan to shreds. Now, the only answer out of my mouth as the planning lead is what? Thanks for your input, next. And I write it down. Why? Man, I just spent 2 hours planning this thing. Of course I thought about that. No, I didn't. But yeah, I did. Don't say a word. Thanks, next. Go around, let them shoot everything. Every time I've done a red team in my military and business career, it has made the plan better. I use the popcorn rule. When there's a couple seconds between them shooting and now they're just like, you need to polish your boots too and get a haircut. All right, we're done. Kick them out, kick out the red team, and then get your original planning team back together and go, holy crap, man, look at this. About 70% of it we already thought of, but the other 30%, wow. And it makes your plan tighter. If you don't red team your plan, who's going to do it for you? The enemy, your competition. And they're going to love to red team your plan for you, aren't they? Knock out the red team before you go execute. We planned, we adjusted the plan. Now it is time to communicate the plan to the folks that are going to go execute. Another acronym, you ready for it? BRIEF. B-R-I-E-F. Folks, this is called a brief. It ain't called a long, it's called a brief. And it is not a meeting. This is the last step before you go execute the mission. Creates alignment. In a brief, everybody has clarity into, all right, Whiz is going to be at this altitude, Matt's at this, your drop. Everybody has situational awareness. Everybody is aligned. The arrows are aligned. Situational awareness. It assigns action items. In a brief, we go around the room and what? Steve, you're doing X, Y, and Z by these dates and times. Whiz, I got it. Right? Creates that culture of accountability. When you're sitting in a room with your teammates, you're like, man, I got this. Vertical head nods. Everybody is aligned. BRIEF. Use this structure. I gave you those 6 steps for a reason. Now you have some structure to your planning. Now you're going to get structure to the brief. B, brief the leader's intent. There's nothing worse than getting in a brief and they're like, all right, here's what we're going to go do. I'm like, no. Why are we doing this? What is the admiral's? What's the boss? What's the general's leader's intent? Oh, okay, that's what we're doing. That's the star we're navigating to. Then R, restate the mission objective. Now we get to that tactical mission objective. I, here's the threats and here's the resources to negate those threats. E, execution. Here's who's doing what by when. You can see the steps, the 6 steps to my planning process are laying in here quite nicely, aren't they? And F, you end your brief with flexibility. Here's what could go wrong in the execution, and here's what we're going to do about it. Boom. That's a brief, folks. Use that acronym, BRIEF. At the end of the brief, I look literally in everybody's eye and go around the room. Are there any questions, concerns? Oh, by the ways, smart remarks. This is the last time before we get airborne. Everybody has to, if there's not a vertical head nod, there's a horizontal. Okay, clarity. This is where you clear it up. You don't sit there and go, man, I have no idea what we're doing. This is the chance to speak. If any of you have watched A&E or the History Channel or any military aviation things, usually it's kind of crowded on the radio, right? It sounds like it's really complicated. 90% of the missions that I've been on, nobody says a word. It would be deathly quiet to you. Not to me. Why is it so quiet on the radio? Because everything's going as briefed. The only time we get on the radio and start kind of talking is when? When things ain't going as planned. In my businesses, I don't need look at me emails like, hey, I knocked out my action item today. Duh. I don't need to hear. It's communication by exception. The only time I want to hear something is what? When something ain't going as briefed. Okay? Now we're ready to launch. Tight plan, it's been red team, we've briefed. Now it's time to execute. Execution is pretty easy, right? Execution, it just comes from step 5. Here's who's going to do what by when. We knocked out a good brief, and we're using our corporate battle rhythm. And we just talked about calm by exception. But there's one thing that as a businessman, as a fighter pilot, constantly gets in the way of that superior execution. And that's performance draining task saturation. Now we call task saturation the silent killer. Why? Because it's silent, it sneaks up on you, and it's very, very deadly. I have 2 very good friends who are no longer walking the face of the earth right now because they died and they don't even know they're dead. Channelized attention. One of them flew right into the water behind the aircraft carrier at night. Doing a great job paying attention to airspace and Iran and this, talking on the radio, dumping fuel because if you land too heavy, you'll snap the cable. Doing all sorts of stuff. Paying attention to everything except one very important thing. What was that? Altitude. Flew right into the water. That's the way task saturation works. It's silent, it's insidious, and it sneaks up on you. Task saturation, big words, Whiz. Well, let me go political science major. It's the perception or the reality of having too much to do without enough time, tools, or resources to get the job at hand done. Now I'm going to share with you a very poignant example from my world. On the evening of December 29th, 1972, Eastern Airlines Flight 401 was on a routine flight from JFK down to Miami International, where it was a beautiful, clear winter evening, so weather's not a factor. The first officer was the flying pilot. He's flying the airplane. Now, in case you don't know, it's standard practice in the airline industry for the captain and the FO, the first officer, to alternate flying responsibilities on different legs of the flight so they could both maintain flying proficiency. That's kind of a benefit for us in the flying public. So on the night in question, the first officer is flying the aircraft. Now, they descend down to 2,000 feet, and the first officer calls for gear down landing checklist. So the captain, the non-flying pilot, reaches over, puts the gear handle to the down position, and when he does, he's looking for one very important action to occur. He's looking for 3 green lights on the forward instrument panel to illuminate to let him know that the landing gear are down and locked and the aircraft lands safely. But as the video picks up, you're going to see that when the captain puts the gear down, he only gets 2 of the required 3 green lights. He gets the left main gear, the right main gear, but the nose wheel light fails to illuminate. I want you to watch as this highly experienced team, 50, 75 years of aviation experience in this cockpit, gets channelized. So the captain says, put the damn thing on autopilot. How do you think our team's doing at this point? They're actually doing pretty well. Their roles are well defined. The first officer is flying the aircraft. He's the flying pilot. The captain is the non-flying pilot. He's backing him up, speaking on the radio. And the flight engineer is back there doing flight engineer duties. Somebody's flying the aircraft, and it's at 2,000 feet. Now let me get a show of hands. How many of you think it's a good idea to put a large commercial airliner on autopilot at 2,000 feet at night? Tricked you. It's actually perfectly fine. I'd say 90, 95% of the time, you're in an airliner at night at 2,000 feet, you're on autopilot. But the key distinction is that the flying pilot, in this case the first officer, needs to monitor the flight controls as if she or he are doing what? Actually manipulating the flight controls. But by the way, the boss, the captain, said, put the damn thing on autopilot. In my opinion, he might as well have said, you know what, hey, Mr. First Officer, reach up, push that magic autopilot button, and let's take the flying thing out of this so all 3 of us can focus on this landing gear issue. Well, unfortunately, the aircraft in question, the Lockheed L-1011, the autopilot system is designed such that if a push or pull force of greater than 5 pounds is exerted against the control yoke, the aircraft would say, I think the stupid human wants to fly. What do you think? Well, he's pushing pretty hard, and the autopilot disconnects. So I want you to watch as the first officer, the flying pilot, jumps in, tries to jiggle that nose wheel light, and gently hits the control yoke. Now at this point, the first officer, the flying pilot, decides to come up for air, and what's he see? 100 feet, right? What's he expecting to see? 2,000 feet. Show of hands, how many of you think this aircraft can be saved at this point? Full power, pull the nose back, the aircraft would have bottomed out at about 50 feet. But what's the problem? This crew is not only channelized on a 20-cent light bulb that's burnt out, they're also kind of channelized in this fictitious airplane that's flying along at autopilot at night at 2,000 feet instead of the one they're currently riding in, which is in a slow, insidious descent down to 100 feet. Folks, this crew, this highly experienced team, spends the next 10 seconds, matter of fact, the rest of their lives, trying to figure out what has happened instead of reacting to what is happening now. Unfortunately, 99 people lost their lives that night because the flight deck crew of Eastern 401 became channelized on a burnout light bulb. That was the only thing that was wrong with that aircraft. The nose wheel was in fact down and locked. Now I don't know about you, I'm looking forward to going to the airport in a little bit and flying to Vermont to see my son graduate this weekend. Awesome, thanks Whiz. I hated flying and you just sealed the deal. Now it's 5 martinis. Guess what folks, as a result of this mishap, numerous positive changes were made so this doesn't happen again. Changes in air traffic controller training. Anybody here old Red in the tower? Hey, Eastern 401, how's it all coming along out there? You know what he saw? On his radar scope, they left their assigned altitude of 2,000 feet and enter a descent. Do you think that could have been communicated a little bit better? Today, Eastern 401, I show you leaving your assigned altitude of 2,000 feet, say intentions. Because if you're more than 200 feet off altitude today, there goes your license. How about cockpit resource? Under 10,000 feet today, the cockpit is sterilized. If it ain't about safety of flight and a checklist, shut up. Could have made schedule, it's always something. All that type of chatter is gone. So don't worry about it, folks. We debriefed this mishap. Anybody ever get on an airliner when they're going through their checklist and you hear altitude, pull up, pull, whoop, whoop? We have terrain warning system. So everything's fine, but this is a great example of what can happen when you become channelized. And I'm going to give you a way to not fly critical portions of your business into the ground by doing what is called a cross-check, right? A cross-check to success. Now, the number one mission objective of any aviator is what? Don't hit the ground or anything assigned to it, right? Maintain aircraft control. And we do that by doing what we call constant attitude checks, right? And it's not whether Mary shows up with a smile on her face. Looks like that woman's always smiling. But no kidding, the attitude of the aircraft. And when I'm flying at night or in bad weather in the clouds, I need an instrument that's going to let me know if I'm climbing or descending, turning left or turning right. And we call that instrument the attitude indicator. Now this, ladies and gentlemen, is just a typical mock-up of an aircraft cockpit. And the attitude indicator is where? Right there in the center. Okay? Now for all the Army guys in the audience, the brown represents the ground and the blue is the sky, right? So more brown than blue, house is getting bigger, bad day potentially coming. But I want you to see the attitude indicator up close. There it is, right? Now see if you can pick up a pattern here. Take a look at that real quick. This is what we call a scan. Okay, airspeed, I'm a little slow, add some power, back to the attitude. Heading, they assign me 360, I'm flying 63, boom. We call this a hub and spoke cross-check. We all go out and look at some other instruments, but we have got to make sure that attitude indicator is the center focus of our scan. Otherwise, bad things can happen. You channelize on one of those external things for too long, you're going to fly into the ground. So for the Top Guns in this room, what's your attitude indicator, right? Potentially, what's that one thing you all need to focus on? The customer. If they ain't happy, we're not sitting here at the Broadmoor, right? So the customer, satisfaction, everything that goes along with the customer, all of it. But hey, Whiz, I got a pretty big cockpit. recruitment, retention. I don't know if you've been keeping up on current events, Wiz. I do. Parts availability, supply chain issues, emails, meetings, complaints. Got to work, strive to that 5-star, lean, CI. You name it, folks. I get it. There's a lot going on, but always, always come back to your attitude indicator. If you have somebody in your cockpit staring at something for too long, it might help as the commanding officer, the captain, the boss, to say, hey, let's come up out of the weeds, man. We are way task saturated on something else. And as a boss, start getting rid of some of these. I do a nice workshop where I have people number these. And it's usually, let me talk about this real quick. As a boss, I can send you a blank one of these. Hand these out to your employees. Let me know what you think the number one thing is, and then I want you to number the rest of them, like 2 through 7. And if you get those back and you're shocked, you got problems, right? But it's always a good I do this quarterly with my employees, man. If their number one ain't what it's supposed to be, I have failed as a leader. Or they're not listening properly. We'll get to that, right? But when somebody becomes task saturated, I tell them to ditch number 7, whatever number 7 on their list was, number 6. When an employee comes to me and says, Wiz, I am buried, I don't come down on them. I actually praise them. Why? Because they care. You would think here's type A and there's fighter pilots over A infinity, right? You'd think we would be the last people on the face of the earth that would say we can't hack something, and you'd be wrong. Now again, my wife would say he loves himself too much to die, and there's some truth in that. But I don't want to fail. So if I am getting task saturated, I put up the bat signal and tell my wingman, like, dude, I need some help. And that shows that you care. Most companies, most corporations wear task saturation as what? A badge of honor. I got 8 million things going on. They can't get rid of me, or I'm really important. Unless you're sucking at all 8 million things. And that's bad. So don't come down on people who are saying, hey man, I'm task. We all know certain folks who are going to sandbag. They're in a separate category. I'm talking about other folks who just kind of keep to themselves and take a lot of stuff on. If they put up the bat signal and say, I'm task saturated, listen to them and help them out. We planned, we red teamed, we briefed, we went out and executed. Now it is time to what? Say it with me. Debrief. After every mission, we get in behind closed doors and we knock out that nameless and rankless debrief where no punches are pulled, and it is about improving future execution. Now the Blue Angels, the varsity team, these folks fly a Coke can distance apart at some points, inverted at a couple hundred feet, 400, 500 miles an hour. They do that same routine for 2 years, 3 years if you're the solo pilot. How many of you in this room believe that the Blue Angels feel the need to debrief after the 10th, 100th, 252nd time they fly the same air show routine? Well, let's go fly with the Blue Angels and let's see what they have to say about debriefing.
Structured platform in which we debrief, we examine our mistakes so that we get the very best information to improve every time we fly. I'll tell you how specific it gets. We can debrief a march out to the airplanes and a march back at the conclusion of the show.
What's most remarkable about the post-flight debrief is that within the military structure, where rank is so highly regarded, a debrief among the Blues is nameless and rankless. Everyone universally acknowledges it's not who's right, it's what's right.
Rank or experience doesn't come into play. Those things are good, but you have to set those aside when criticism starts to come, because that's the only way you're going to learn in the new rank. That's the only way you're going to get to where it looks good and it's safe, day in and day out, every demonstration.
Safety low right across first one. I guess the best analogy would be it's like a mulligan. It's your opportunity to come into the debrief and say, look, these are the things that I didn't do right today. And that is giving you the opportunity to fess up, identify your own shortfalls, and say, I'm going to fix these for tomorrow.
I'll fix my safeties by the year. Mr. Ross, my specific goal is to down and roll, and I safeties, I'll fix it.
The last thing you say is, I'll fix my safeties, I'm glad to be here.
Deviations, no matter how small from the brief flight plan, are called safeties. These are problems or violations from the strict Blue Angel standards within each flight. Through extensive review of videotape and the experience of the critique team all around, each and every maneuver is observed and debriefed move by move. Each performance adjustment or safety is acknowledged by the appropriate team member and, most importantly, punctuated with the phrase, and I'll fix it.
The debrief is one of the most important things we do. If we don't debrief, if we ever get complacent, we're not only going to kill ourselves, we risk killing somebody else. We've got to be able to learn from each and every time we go forward. Because in over 65 years, there has never been a flight demonstration put on by the Blue Angel. So we're always working and striving towards executing a demonstration flawlessly.
I made this mistake, and I'll fix it. What's the most important pronoun? I. Who led the debrief? Funny enough, his call sign or her call sign is what? Boss. The boss comes into a debrief and says, I made these mistakes, and then goes around the room and says, what do you have for me? What does that do? That lowers the barriers to communication. What happens in 99.9% of the debriefs in the business world? The boss comes in with what type of pronouns? We, you, us. We'll get to that, Kemosabe. A good leader steps up and says, here's what I know I did wrong. What can I do better on the next mission? When I flew with the Blue Angels, Intake, who was talking, one of my best friends since 1992, we went through flight school together, in the debrief, he said, I was 20 feet low on the loop brake cross, and I'll fix that. And I'm sitting there scratching my head, and I'm like, how many people in that Oklahoma City air show audience saw him 20 feet low? How many of the Blue Angels who were doing their own stuff saw him 20 feet low? Who saw Intake 20 feet low? He did, and he fessed up to it. So that creates a culture on that team of, awesome, I trust Intake. He fessed up, and he finished with what words? I'm going to fix it. That's how you create a high-performing team, ladies and gentlemen. The debrief is not about who's right. It's about what's right. And that's the culture we have as fighter pilots that allow us to achieve that superior executed mission. Knock out the debrief, and when you do, make it nameless and make it rankless, and I guarantee you, you're going to win. So hopefully by this time in our presentation, I have a couple believers in our corporate battle rhythm, right? That acronym I gave you, PACE, plan, adjust, communicate, execute, and debrief. If you do that, I guarantee you, you're going to win. Superior execution. It is achievable. You want to be in pursuit of that superior executed mission by doing those 6 steps to planning. Having that clear mission objective, to contingency planning. Rip it apart with the red team. Put away the ego. I thought of this plan, I thought of everything. No, you didn't. I guarantee you didn't. And the folks who you have red team your plan now have a little invested in your mission, don't you? After I've red team, people usually follow up like, hey, Whiz, how'd you make out, or stuff like that. You create agents when you involve the red team. Knock out a brief, it ain't along. Knock out a brief, and those 3 magic words, I got it. Make sure you hear that from everybody. Defeat that task saturation. As a boss, recognize it in yourself, and if you see it in yourself, put up the bad signal. I need some help. Nobody's going to give you any grief for that. Not in my world. We go, dude, what do you need? I got you. It's called mutual support. And then when you debrief, again, check the egos at the door, and I guarantee you, you're going to win. What a great time. I spoke with Whirlpool back at the mothership a couple years ago, pre-pandemic, for an event, the W Veterans Association and the Homes for Our Troops. Is Zach here this morning? Zach, Bree? So you all are doing a great job. You're helping a disabled veteran. I met Zach last night. Lieutenant Colonel Galbraith is here from Homes for Our Truth. Thank you, sir, for what you're doing to help out. So Whirlpool is just an incredibly veteran-supportive organization. Danny V from Jersey, it was nice meeting you. Sounded like you innovated and did some good work during some that's a tough market too, man. I know. And then Scott and Crystal, right? Where's the Montana folks? Are Scott and Crystal in here? There you are. I hear you're doing some good work as well, thinking outside of the box. From what I hear, you all are knocking it out of the park. Sucked, right? Past 2 years sucked. Let's just use that word. In the military, we use the term what? Embrace the suck. But you guys have worked through it. Crawl. Now you're back to walking. This is what your commanding officers are doing over these next couple days. Now we're going to get back to sprinting and running, and I guarantee you, you're going to do it, because I'm going to be checking back in to hear from you. So do me a favor. Well, first of all, thanks for your time. Matt, PJ, Mark, Dave, Dallas, Mary, thank you for having me. I appreciate it. I'll be at the back if you want me to sign your book or anything like that, or if you have any questions. But do me a favor. Go out there, kick ass, and take names. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Thanks, buddy.